Ma.
Hello and welcome to episode. What number is this?
This is like, what, 19? Oh my god, no? 20.
No, it's like
20.
Hello and welcome back to Fabulous Duo Short Stories. We're on episode 20.
Yes.
That's 20 weeks of doing this. It's crazy.
It is. Can you imagine writing like 20 stories? God.
40
I love
stories for your listening pleasure if you listen to the whole playlist of our...
if you listen to the pleasure. So, yeah, we're on episode 20. So far it has been really fun. Can you believe it's been like, what, 20, a couple more weeks, and that'll be like half the year.
Yeah, man.
That's crazy.
Do math. Let's like...
Yeah.
6, 7 more weeks, and then we'll be like, I don't know, man. I can't do math.
No, 8. 8? I don't know. All I know is that there are days in a year.
Like plenty, right?
Yeah, like lots.
Right, yeah. Anyways, so we're reading stories, right, on this?
Oh, I thought this was a parody episode. But yeah, no, we're definitely doing stories.
A parody of what? This is how we are.
So don't forget that everybody tuning in here, you could be listening on either Listen Notes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Samsung Podcasts, and Podbean. We also are on YouTube. So you can just check out YouTube for Fabulous Duo, and we'll pop up there. You will be able to like, subscribe, leave comments on the videos themselves, and yeah. We're super excited that we have that platform opened up for us now.
All right, without further ado, should we start?
Yeah, did you want to give anybody, or everybody, or just me, a recap of what happened last week?
Not really, no.
Okay. Well, so what happened last week was that Michelle had a wonderful story. It was a prompt that I gave her where a person had a job at a prison to try and break their friend out without anybody noticing. And that was definitely a story.
Yeah.
Prison happened.
What?
Yeah, prison.
Yeah, prison. And Kristen's was a story about a world where people use bubbles instead of planes as if they were private jets. And it takes an interesting turn.
Yeah. With our recaps, obviously we don't want to give spoilers just in case you're tuning into this episode and haven't listened to us read the previous one. So go ahead, take a look, have fun.
So off you go. Go on.
Hello, ta-ta.
All right. I'll wait.
Yeah. Michelle will be starting us off this week reading the story that I have prepared. Please.
Please. Give me some oil. Anyway. Okay, so for this week, the prompt was a love story between a vampire and a mummy. The title of the story is Wrath of Sekhmet. A long time ago, there was a pharaoh that lived in Egypt with his beloved. They did not rule over their people with their own greed in mind, as others had done before them. Their people made temples and statues to worship them of their own accord. Unfortunately, their rule was very short-lived due to the jealousy of rival civilizations. The pharaoh, Khans, and the wife, Khepri, were fierce warriors, although raising such a peaceful kingdom. Khans was a master in the art of archery, able to pierce through any target before they could even notice him. It was said that he was born with the gift of the Eye of Ra. Khepri, on the other hand, enjoyed getting up close and personal in combat. Brandishing 2 khopesh blades, she would effortlessly dance through the battlefield, slicing down anyone in her path. Her people believed that she was the embodiment of Sekhmet, based on her beauty and combat prowess. The happier the people were, the more jealous the other nations became. Their people willingly craft them statues? They actually share their royal meals with everyone and expect nothing in return? They make a mockery out of monarchy. We are superior and rule over our people for a reason. We are above them. These were the collected thoughts of the neighboring countries, witnessing how a civilization runs so much smoother when you are open and trusting with your people, versus forcing everyone into slave labor to do what benefits only those at the top. The countries had made a pact with each other to try and freeze out Egypt from all of their trading deals. They would ignore them when they made any offer, no matter how sweet of a deal it was for them. This did not anger Khans or Khepri, as they believed the nations had their reasoning for it and were just putting their own people's needs first, as they would have done. The reaction the neighboring nations received angered them even more. So they don't care about trading with us? How dare they not beg at our feet? They should be crumbling by now. No matter what point in history we are in, humans just could not stand the idea of other humans living happily. How could someone else be better off than me? How could they be happy and successful while I am here being miserable, regardless of what I achieve in life, bitter and empty? Those are the type of people that Khans and Khepri were dealing with, and they never let it get to them once. Another thing about humans is that those with that inner light of happiness and joy will try to spread it as much as those with bitterness try to spread their foul mood. We can see that it tries to maintain a healthy balance. But the world shifts so much towards one more than the other at times, and this time it was definitely leading in favor of the bitterness. The neighboring nations had teamed up and gathered their militia, heading straight for Egypt with complete takeover in mind. None of them cared on how to divide the land. They just wanted them gone. They were at a point in their frustration where they would be happy having this become a desolate land where nothing can survive or flourish. It was as if they were trying to erase Egypt from the map. The darkness in their hearts had completely taken over, and it was debatable if you could still call them human. Although Khans and Khepri were excellent warriors, there was nothing they would be able to do against an army from multiple nations at once. In the distance, they could see the armies swarming across the land getting ready to engage. They alerted their people and asked that if anyone wishes to fight, they may. Otherwise, they should lock themselves within the temples and wait for this to all be over. The pharaoh and his queen shared one last kiss and made a promise that no matter what happens, they would always be together. Khans had amassed all of their archers and lined them strategically along the highest points of their structures. Khepri had gathered her troops and they marched forward just enough to be away from the civilians and held their ground. As the enemy forces approached, all of the warriors were feeling overwhelmed. From a distance, it looked like a million little ants coming towards you, but the closer they got, the more real of a threat this was. My people, we are blessed by the gods, and these trespassers will know our fury. We will send their kings to Anubis, Khepri shouted to her troops. They all began to cheer and shout, their morale greatly increased from hearing the unwavering strength in their queen's voice. The sun was shining from behind Khepri, outlining her with a radiant light, emphasizing her heavenly presence. The troops believed this was also a fortunate blessing from the gods, as the enemy force rushing towards them would have this blinding light obscuring their vision, followed by a barrage of arrows raining down upon them, signifying the beginning of this war. In between the barrage of arrows, you could see exactly which ones had been shot by the pharaoh, as he had personalized each one himself with some gold gilding to affect the weight, and the arrowhead itself was extremely long and sharp, almost as if he was shooting miniature javelins. The arrows pierced through the enemy force's front lines, impaling limbs and skulls one after another. As quickly as the barrage ended, Khepri slid into the crowd and cleaved through flesh and bone, her enemies around her falling to their knees, as she had removed most of their legs. All that stood before her froze in her merciless onslaught, watching their friends being cut down one by one. The sun was setting, and both forces were at a point where their hands were cramped. their bodies all covered in wounds and blood. A shock went across the crowd, and everyone put their weapons down. "I got her!" "Ha ha 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 ha! Not so godly now, are you?" A commander of one of the opposing armies shouted while holding on to Khepri by the hair. Seeing their leader broken and mangled in the hands of the enemy, the Egyptian army had lost all of their will to fight and hoped that by surrendering, they would spare Khepri's life. "Good little ants! Put your weapons down and make way!" The commander walked forward through the group of soldiers parting, as he dragged Khepri's body while she struggled. The commander made it into the city and shouted for Khans to come down to meet him and discuss their terms to end this war. The commander was so generous that he stated they would spare everyone's lives and Khepri would be set free. Khans could not refuse this offer and willingly surrendered. As they shackled him up, the commander's laughter began to roar throughout the crowd. "She is coming back with us! We said we would let her go, but we did not say where." With that, they took her back to their kingdom and kept her locked away in a cell. Over the course of the next few days, the nations that had gathered to take away the Egyptian kingdom had plotted what to do next. "The best way to get rid of a disease is to cut it out," was their final judgment on this. They had returned to Egypt to check on their militia that had been holding down the city and making sure the civilians were doing as told, and no one was out of line. The leaders entered the city for the first time since the battle and made their way to the holding area where Khans was shackled, each of them with a devious grin on their faces. They gestured to the guards to let Khans out. Pulled out of his cell and thrown onto his knees, one of the leaders approached and tilted his chin up to them. "Ah, yes, the light in your eyes. It's gone. You should see the state that your Khepri is in at the moment. It'll be amazing to see what she looks like after we tell her what we did to you." With that, they nodded again to the guards and walked away. The guards picked up Khans by the shoulders and dragged him, following the leaders to the embalming room. "We've heard a lot of this mummification thing," one of the leaders had said in an inquisitive tone, while touching one of the blades in the room. The guards placed Khans on the table and began to tie him down. He stopped after placing his hand on the strange hook-looking tool. "Let's start with this one." A few weeks later, Khepri was still in her cell holding on just barely, thinking of her beautiful husband coming to save her, or maybe even for her to break out of here somehow after convincing a guard to defect to her side. Suddenly, the sound of loud footsteps heading toward her cell echoed through the hallway. Approaching her was one of the leaders with a disgusting smirk on his face. "Hey, beautiful. You'll be pleased to hear that we started embracing a bit more of your culture, and I must say, we are fascinated." Khepri had a very confused look on her face and questioned, "I'm glad you are looking towards broadening your views, but what parts of our culture have you taken to?" she asked softly. The man was waiting for this question and beckoned for a guard to bring in a small cart carrying an assortment of jars. He placed the jars down inside the cell and left her there with them. Khepri had an idea of what this was, but she refused to believe it. She stared at the jars and her heart was racing, but at the same time felt like it was going to stop. Upon opening each of the lids, she saw them filled with different organs in them. Instead of crying and feeling sadness, something else washed over her. Her insides ran cold, and her blood felt as if it stopped pumping. She opened the jars and began eating the organs to fill this sudden void inside of her. The more she ate, the less full she felt. She wanted more. She got up and walked over to her cell door, then bashed through the bars until she had freed herself. She was filled with this strange rage and hunger inside of herself. The moonlight gleaming into the corridors helped guide her through to the exit, somehow ripping apart everyone in her way. She gazed out at the sky and saw that the moon was a beautiful red today. She inhaled and took a deep breath of the fresh air surrounding her for a moment, before she had to run from the sound of the guards alerting that the prisoner had escaped. She fled the city and made her way to another, as she knew that they would be waiting for her back at her home in Egypt. The months passed by, and Capri's newfound diet was doing her well. She slept for most of the day, and at night had the chance to prowl around searching for her next meal. She had only been feeding on those that were from the empires that had wronged her and her husband Khan's. Over time, she also began to discover that she had shifted into something else. Truly, she was the embodiment of Sekhmet, the first vampire. Time went on, and she kept hidden, doing what needed to be done to fill her hunger and satiate her need for revenge. The more time passed, the more comfortable she became with herself, and the more she felt in control of her body and newfound power. The moonlight kept her feeling energized. As the years went on, civilization began changing, and the Egypt Khepri used to know was now considered ancient. She had adapted so well to her affliction that no one could even tell that she had been sampling their blood these days. In fact, they just thought they both had too much to drink and got a bit too flirtatious that night. This was even easier for her, as she lived a life of luxury due to opening a museum that hosted many Egyptian artifacts she was able to keep retrieving from her homeland back when she was getting her revenge. She kept searching for more and more, as if she was trying to rebuild any semblance of her past life, or if she was just trying to feel at home again in this foreign place she was forced to adapt to. Her searching was finally put to an end when she managed to get the most prized artifact in Egypt at the time. The company that had delivered this artifact was told to bring it straight up to her penthouse, as this would be an item for her personal collection. She opened up the crate and ran her fingers across the large stone object with beautiful decorative carvings in astonishing colors. She pushed the top layer of the stone and gently laid it on the side, then put her hand in and caressed the bandages gently. "Finally, my love, I have found you. We are reunited, and this time we will never be apart again." The end.
Ta-da!
Aw, that was so good!
So, I know the prompt is a love story between a vampire and a mummy, but it kind of still was.
It was. He was a mummy.
Yeah, and she is a vampire.
Well, then it was.
Yeah, it was. So, fun fact, people actually believe that Sekhmet, the goddess, was the world's first vampire because of, like, one of the things, like, you know Bastet?
Cat?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like, Bastet and Sekhmet are kind of like two sides of the same coin. But while Bastet was focused more on, like, the healing side of things, like, they're both cats. So one is focused more towards, like, healing and things like that. The other was a little bit more geared towards war. And they said that Sekhmet could only be calmed down from her, like, rage when she was given, like, blood to drink. But that also fueled her love for war.
Oh, and that's why they said that she was the first vampire, because she was calmed down by blood?
Yeah, blood was the only thing that satiated her.
Interesting.
It's really interesting, and, like, you know, the whole thing. Like, I love, like, ancient Egyptian, like, lore and stuff, and Sekhmet is a sun deity as well, because, like, it's the whole thing kind of, like, I don't know, it's weird for me because Sekhmet and Bastet being, like, the duality, and I know that the way things go with gods and whatever is, like, everyone sleeps with everybody, but it's just always a little bit like, oh boy, you know, I believe Ra and Isis that were the parents of Bastet and Sekhmet, but Bastet and Sekhmet were both Ra's consort.
Sounds like ancient.
Sounds like gods. Yeah.
I mean, yes, sounds normal.
Sounds normal. But yeah, so that was the thing, and that was fun, and like I really enjoyed this prompt just because like I love Egypt, and I always love having a chance to discuss Egypt.
I'm so glad. I'm glad. I honestly, nowadays I'm just thinking these up, and I'm not even like thinking about what's possible. No, I'm just like, here's something weird, and I'm like glad that you took what I was like, what the hell is this, and you made this really nice story. And I also really like the twist where, the mummy, like I didn't specify that any of them the mummy had to be alive, so it was a mummy. So, yeah.
That's the thing. I was like thinking of like ways to go about this, and I was like, you know what, this could be like a cute story where they were separated because of war, and then he is waiting in his chambers in his tomb as a mummy and doesn't realize that she's alive, and then one day when he gets like donated to a museum and he like roams around at nighttime, she finds out that exhibit existed and then goes there and sees him, and then they reunite and they fall in love, and then the next day the museum's like, so there's been a break-in and the mummy's gone, but he's actually just out living his best life with his vampire Khepri.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, this is better.
Yeah, I know, because you get to go into the details of the war. Like, I really like the details of the war, and I like that happened. I also like how we got Khepri fighting, which was really cool. And yeah, I don't know, it was cool. And I like the tragicness of it. Like it's like the whole overarching story is just like an ancient tragedy, which I really like.
I was just really sad writing that they pulled his brain out while he was alive.
Where did you write that?
So where he so when the leader, the guards placed Khans on the table and began to tie him down. He stopped after placing his hand on this strange hook-looking tool. Let's start with this one. And that was in the embalming room.
Okay, but I don't know what that is.
So
I mean, there's that thing where they whisk your brain around, right?
Well, so they have an assortment of tools for taking out your organs piece by piece. So it's the thing that I did. The reason why, now, not many people know this, but some people can imagine, because, mummification is not something that just happens overnight. I did put a few weeks later, although naturally it would take about 70 days for the full mummification process. So
of
because
the organs too?
So the thing is that you would take out the organs and drain the body and everything like that. You'd be pulling everything out. But you have to actually have the entire body covered in salt to dehydrate it. And that's what takes so long, because it has to dehydrate. So you wouldn't be able to just mummify someone after taking their organs out and draining them. You have to go through the process. Otherwise, like, there still will be moisture and everything, and those bandages are just going to be like soggy and stuff. But the thing is that since these people are from neighboring nations that aren't aware of the actual Egyptian traditions and like that kind of stuff, like that's why they said to Khepri when they visited her, it's like, hey, we're starting to embrace your culture, because they've never experienced this before, right? So they were interested in mummification, and they just did a rush job. So they ripped out the organs, first of all, like while he was alive, which is just torture. That wasn't supposed to happen. Like, you're not supposed to do that. Yeah, so they actually pulled his brain out while he was alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt a little bit bad writing that, but also I felt that it gave some good, like, character building stuff towards the tragedy that is their relationship.
Character building as it's disassembling. Character is being disassembled. What building?
Exactly. Because it's just, I don't know. I just felt like it added that extra layer of scary world building of what people are actually like, especially like back then. People were, they're like what we have today versus what they would have done back then. Definitely torture, because obviously torture is a thing. I would not see that out of character for a jealous commander or like, you know, these people who think they're better than you, who think they can just step on you because whatever. Even though it took multiple nations to you guys to take them down, but whatever.
Yeah, they used to do shit like that all the time. So yeah, that was I really like that, how it was in the war times.
I'm glad that she got to tear everybody apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad she got to rip everybody apart. So that was nice.
Yeah, fast show.
Yeah, so I'm glad you liked the story.
Yes, it was good. I like, to me, tragic stories with like details of war like this are delicious.
They are delicious, like blood.
Whoa, hold on. What are you trying to say?
Hold on.
You trying to expose me right now?
What's happening, Sekhmet? Okay, I'm glad you enjoyed, and I hope that everybody listening enjoyed as well. But that gets us over to let's see how Michelle starts, because like, okay, I'm usually the bright and cheery one, and I gave Michelle a prompt that I thought was hilarious, but let's see what she did with it.
Yeah.
So the prompt that I gave Michelle was: aliens visit Earth wanting to take over, but are extremely disappointed. The story is called For the Sake of the World. Some people think they know everything. Others think that they don't know anything. And everyone else knows that there are some things that are better off unknown. She was one of the ones who thought she knew everything until she was hired for a job at the World Organization of Really Supernatural Things, Co. Otherwise known as Worst Co. Margaret was a freelance headhunter hired to find a temp worker for the corporation. It was in a headhunter's best interest to look into and understand the company to be able to find someone suitable for the role. However, for this particular company, she was not able to find any solid answers. Every bit of information she uncovered just brought more and more questions. For days, she was driving herself mad just trying to understand the role, and she was quickly running out of time. The requirements for the job were that they just wanted someone personable, friendly, and able to adapt to any situation. But they wouldn't tell her the salary or what the hours would be like, just that it would be a temp job. Anytime she asked for clarification, she was brushed aside or ignored, so she finally decided to schedule an in-person meeting with the client. But it was after hours. Margaret didn't have the energy to argue with the secretary at the time, so when the secretary scheduled her in after hours, she threatened to quit if she couldn't meet with anyone that day. If it wasn't for the price tag on this contract, she would have quit the moment they didn't tell her what they were offering for a salary. She liked her job. She liked helping people get to where they wanted to be in life, and she wouldn't risk offering someone a shady job, especially when they had been relying on her. The only good thing about this company so far was that they were located just 15 minutes from her house by car. Arriving 10 minutes early, she pulled into the underground parking and took the spot closest to the elevators. She got out of her car and looked around the lot. It was completely deserted, which made sense since this was way past office hours. She could feel herself heat up in anger at the thought of coming all the way out here just to be snubbed again. She had other things she could be doing, but she swallowed her pride again and headed inside. It took a little longer than she expected to find the office where she was supposed to meet her client, resulting in her being right on time when she finally found it and knocked on the door. Come in, a voice called from inside. She quickly turned the handle to try and open the door, but it wouldn't budge. She could feel herself heat up again, and her hands started to sweat. Were they messing with her? She really didn't have time for this. Clearing her throat, she called back. It's locked. Trying her hardest to hide her irritation. She had always been good at that, but this time, she was just about ready to snap. As soon as the words left her mouth, she could hear rustling inside the office. Well, it seems like this one might have manners, she thought. The door swung open, and a man about her age met her eyes with a frantic look on his face. He moved to the side and gestured for her to enter the office. "I'm so sorry about that," he said, closing the door behind her as she walked in. Despite the sincere apology and the fact that it was an honest mistake, Margaret was still irritated. Without looking at him, she simply muttered, The iciness of her tone seemed to have frozen the man behind her. He wasn't the client she originally spoke with when she took this job. Unfortunately for him, it looks like he was left here as a scapegoat for an angry headhunter, i.e. her. "Where's Mr. Fresk?" she asked, taking a seat at his desk. I am Mr. Fresk. You met with Mr. Fresk Sr. I am his son. Nice to meet you," he said, sitting across from her, offering his hand. She took his hand and shook it. Was the Mr. Fresk she met before old enough to have a son her age? "Nice to meet you. I'll be frank, this contract is impossible, and people keep giving me the runaround, and if you don't answer my questions, you won't have anyone for this job that you need in a few days," she blurted out at him. She had hoped to handle the meeting with more tact than that, but she already said the words, and besides, she felt better for having said them. "I understand, Miss..." He trailed off, implying that he wanted to know her name. Swallowing her pride again, she sighed. "You can call me Margaret, but you really should make an effort to know the names of the people you're meeting with before you meet them," she grumbled. He smiled. "I'll keep that in mind, Miss Margaret. Now, what questions do you have for me?" "I need to know what the salary would be like and also what qualifications are required. I can't work with just friendly and personable," she snapped. His eyebrows raised a bit. He seemed to be surprised at what she just told him. "You certainly can't work with just that much information," he said. "I'm sorry, I guess my father was giving you a hard time." He looked down, and she felt a pang of guilt in her chest. She didn't mean to take her day out on him, but it wasn't just his father. The whole company was giving her a hard time. I'm glad you understand," she muttered, also looking down at her lap. Margaret heaved a sigh. "But that's still no reason to be this unpleasant to you. I'm sorry," she said, looking up at him. I am also a very busy person, and everyone had been giving me the runaround all week, and No, it's my fault for asking my father to take care of this for me. You see, I asked him to find someone for me, and I guess he just didn't want to do it himself." There was something of an awkward silence as her fingers played with the edge of the file she was carrying. He cleared his throat. What's that?" he asked, gesturing to the file. "Oh, right," she said, startled. The situation had really thrown off her game. Holding up the file for him to take a look, she explained. "I was hoping we could get this done today, so I compiled a list of 20 of the most friendly and personable people on my roster. Impressive, he muttered as he slowly leafed through the file. If we can discuss the details of the job, we can narrow down the list tonight, and maybe I can stop worrying about it, she said with a nervous laugh, trying to dispel the awkward atmosphere. He seemed to stiffen up at that for some reason. Well, he began. Oh no, not another vague answer, she thought, smile dropping from her face. I needed someone to show me around. He trailed off. What? She asked. He cleared his throat, as if he was able to sense the rage in her. You see, I'm not from here, and I just wanted someone to... You wanted a tour guide? She could feel the anger rise in her throat and seep out into the cold tone of her voice. I suppose, yes, he stammered at her. She closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose in response. Sighing, she reached out and dragged the file closer to her and started ruffling through it. This is Lennon. He's trying to make it as a musician, but sometimes he needs some extra cash, so he takes small jobs from me. He knows all the best clubs in town and all the best people. Really fun to hang out with, she said, sliding a page over to him. This is Tessa. She is what you would call a soccer mom, but her husband left her a long time ago, so now she has to raise her kids alone. If she ever has time between her 2 jobs and raising her kids, I'll pick up the top paying jobs for her to do. Her kids play all over the city, and she knows all the best restaurants. Margaret kept picking out file after file, giving him a brief summary of each person until there were 7 profiles facing him on his desk. When she was finally done with her presentation, she looked up to find him staring at her instead of the profiles she'd just laid out. Well? She asked. I think I've made my choice. Without taking his eyes off her, he picked up the profile of the retired military general, leaned closer to her, and asked, would this one know about the codes for the defense shields of Earth? He wasn't close enough to make her feel uncomfortable, but he was close enough for her to notice. However, that was overshadowed by the strange question he had asked. Defense? We don't have anything like that, she said slowly, confusion spreading across her face. Just then, the door to the office burst open, and in walked Mr. Fresk Sr. That wasn't the deal, he yelled at his son. You were supposed to tell me if you wanted her as your tour guide, then let me talk to her before you went sightseeing, he exclaimed. She was livid, turning to face Mr. Fresk Jr. She was ready to let him have it. What on earth are you talking about? The words died on her tongue as she laid eyes on what was supposed to be Mr. Fresk Jr. He was standing there with green skin, pointed ears, and what looked like 2 long antennae protruding from the top of his head. She felt her knees grow weak and collapsed back into her chair, staring at him, wide-eyed. I've decided to take Earth, he said, addressing Mr. Fresk. Why? You already know that Earth has nothing to offer. The last thing we need is a war with your people over something so minuscule, he replied. You have her, he said, pointing a green finger at Margaret. You can take her without taking the whole planet, he retorted. She jumped to her feet, finding her rage again. What? She yelled, leaning on the desk to look him in the eye, which was difficult since he was now 2 feet higher than before. With all due respect, Mr. Call me Econ, he interrupted. She stared up at him with a million thoughts and questions running through her head. Then she sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. With all due respect, Econ, she started through waves of fury. I have no idea what's happening here, but I don't want any part of it, or anything to do with you or this godforsaken company anymore. She turned on her heel and marched her way over to Mr. Fresk. And you! What the hell kind of place calls a headhunter just to waste their time over a tour guide? Are you out of your mind? I have so many other things I could be doing. She screamed right in his face. He wanted you to have the job when he first saw you, so I don't care what he wanted. She grabbed her coat and purse and headed for the door, but right before she could leave, she heard Econ call after her. Wait! She stopped and turned to face him. What? She snapped. It was already so late at night, and she had so much work to do in the morning, she was too tired to keep up her professional demeanor any longer. Econ flinched away from her harsh tone and began to explain. I came here to decide whether or not to take over the Earth and enslave all humans, he sighed. But Mr. Fresk was sure that he can convince me that Earth was useless to us. He cleared his throat, looked down, and began twiddling his thumbs. I was about to leave, but meeting you made me want to dominate this world just to stay with you longer. His hands were on his cheeks as he squeaked out the last bit of his sentence, covering his face as if he was embarrassed. You must be kidding, she started, her tone dripping with bitterness. You had this company push me around for days on end and lied to me about who you were because you were interested in me? Her hands were balled into fists. I have never been so stressed out in my life. I don't even know what's going on here. I hope this is some kind of stress fever dream that I'm having. I do understand one thing, though. If you do take over the Earth, I will hate you for as long as you live. Leave me and the Earth alone. She screeched and walked out the door, leaving the two men behind, gawking at her outburst. Heartbroken. As soon as I make my decision, Econ mumbled to himself. Mr. Fresk walked over to him and clapped a hand on his shoulder. Don't be disappointed. You're welcome to stay as long as you like, if you promise not to take over Earth. Who knows? Maybe she'll talk to you if you go and apologize. You think so? Econ asked with hope in his eyes. Mr. Fresk sighed and patted his shoulder again. Probably not. Oh my god, what a story. That was so good.
Yeah.
What I wanted. I wanted humor.
Yeah. I could go into everything that I usually do, but it's like, how do I come back? Like, how is that? Like, I don't know. So,
I mean, I imagine that you were going to turn this into, like, I had hopes that you were going to make it comedy, but on the off chance, I was like, oh, she's going to expose the world for all the pollution problems and the crisis we have in terms of, like, child slavery and, just
yeah, but then, like,
wars and stuff. It's too real.
Yeah, I was like, why would aliens really care about that? But, yeah, no, I liked writing it. I wasn't going to make the sun, like, disguise himself as the alien disguise himself as the sun.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna do that. So, like, my original plan was, she is gonna basically be hired to escort the aliens around, right? Voluntold type of deal. And in the end, she was gonna, like, show them all the terrible things, like, not even that bad. And then in the end, they will decide not to take Earth because they saw Crocs.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna write. I was still gonna have him, like, be like, okay, I changed my mind because there's Crocs. You're wearing Crocs. This is random Croc hatred. But no, I thought that he could also be disappointed because a girl rejected him. So I'm like, oh,
no, that's amazing. I was really thinking that, like, in the comedy sense, it was gonna go and be like, they come down to Earth, they go to places, like, they see what the service industry is like, and they're just like, so you're telling me that these people look down on you for providing a service, but they don't want you to stop providing that service because they need it and it's convenient to them? Yes, we're leaving. That's it, we're leaving.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's like, I don't know. It's like not.
This is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's this. I wrote this thing. I designed the alien.
Mm-hmm.
And like I drew him. And I think it's gonna become a weekly comic.
Excellent. Yes, good.
I could totally see myself making this a weekly comic, and it'll be like the rest of the comic is just Econ trying to like apologize to her.
Market, please. No,
Yeah.
Econ. I told you, I'm busy.
He'll just be like showing up at her house with like flowers and shit. And then while he's just fixated on her, he becomes acclimated to like Earth living, and he just starts liking it. And he just starts staying there because he likes staying there rather than, something like that. But anyway, that none of that happened. So
it'd be great. I could see it. I could see him going to apologize the next day and showing up and be like, "Look, I brought you a bucket of flowers. It's a bouquet. Oh, that's not what this is different."
Yeah, exactly.
Those are different things.
Yeah, I like writing this.
I like writing this.
I've started naming characters based off of shit I have near me. So I have like Hello Fresh. So the guy's name is Mr. Fresk. And I have
it works.
This thing says, well, it's French, économiser. So his name is Econ.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, what else would it be if not Econ?
The alien, so I'm like,
exactly.
I can have like an alien name, but
yeah, so it's fun that I was doing that last time, like with the names. I was like, oh, I have knitting supplies, Yarna, excellent. I have a clotha, excellent. Clothia. But this week for like my characters' names, like Cons is supposed to mean God of the Moon, and Kepri means morning sun.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was like a fun tie-in. Like if Kepri is like supposed to be the embodiment of Sekhmet, who is a sun deity, and she's called the morning sun, and I emphasize the sun a lot in it, like the sun shining behind her and stuff, and the blinding light, while Cons had the eye of Ra, and that tends to be like Ra is like a sun deity, but they have like a duality part with like the eye of Horus and the eye of Ra, and then there's like a moon in there and stuff. It's a lot, but yeah, naming things.
Yeah, no, I thought those were actual historical figures until you said that just now.
I mean, they are now. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Yeah, no, that was so good. I really enjoyed your story. It was like a great way. I like that, we always seem to find this like mix of being able to have like one story be like gritty and the other one story being upbeat, and it's just like, huh.
Yeah, it's kind of like whatever I feel like writing. And like, to me too, like when I first read the prompt, I was like, oh, I'm gonna talk about conspiracy theories and everything. But then when I sat down to write it, I was like, I'm drinking, so.
How much tequila will make me forget conspiracies?
I'll just be sitting there like, what was the conspiracy thing or theory again? Forget it. The sun is an alien.
Right? Sunlian. So, yeah. I hope that everybody listening enjoyed both of our stories. And if you have any prompts that you might want to, give us, that's the thing. Go ahead. You can even comment in our YouTube, or you can reach out directly at fabulousduo.podbean.com. They have there's a contact page on our website. Yeah.
Yes.
I know it's like if you're listening on Spotify or Listen Notes or Samsung or Google, that you would not be able to have like a direct contact point with us, but you could just head over to our website or our YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that being said, do we have some prompts for next week?
Yeah, we do.
Of course we do.
So, for next week, your prompt is the retired king or queen of thieves is forced to come out of retirement.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I can see this happening. Okay, all right. Thievery. Your prompt for next week is going to be a chef competition where the judges are all cannibals.
That's hilarious. I can't wait for them to eat each other.
like eat the other judges?
Yeah.
All right, chef. So what you're going to be making today is Jeffrey.
Yeah, done. Jeffrey was always a little. The meat tastes a little.
There you go. But yeah, so tune in next week for those new stories. That will be episode 21. And we hope that you all have a fabulous week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. This is a Nakafia woman.
Go.
I gotta edit that out.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Hold on, I gotta.
Piss.
I turned off my fan, closed my windows and everything.
Oh, piss.
And my ass is melting off.
Goras.
God ass.